If you look at the debt clock in Times Square right now, you will see a number that defies human comprehension. It is spinning past $35 trillion and heading rapidly toward $38 trillion. For decades, politicians and economists told us to ignore this number. They told us deficits don't matter. They told us we owe it to ourselves. They treated the national debt like a high score in a video game, scary to look at, but with no real-world consequences. They were lying. In 2024, the math changed. We have entered a new era of fiscal reality where the debt is no longer just a number. It is a predator. And right now, that predator is eating the United States budget alive. Here's a statistic that should keep you up at night. For the first time in history, the US government is spending more on interest payments than it is on national defense. Think about that. We are spending more to pay off the bondholders of the past than we are to equip the military of the present. We are spending more on interest than on the entire Medicaid program. The bill is approaching $1 trillion a year just to keep the lights on. This creates a terrifying phenomenon known as the debt spiral. If you or I run out of money, we cut our spending. We cancel Netflix. We stop eating out. But the government cannot do that. Social Security and Medicare are mandatory promises. They cannot be broken without political suicide. So how do they pay the interest? They borrow more. They are using a new credit card to pay the minimum balance on the old credit card. This increases the debt, which increases the interest, which requires even more borrowing. It is a mathematical feedback loop that only leads to one place: exponential collapse. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so they go bankrupt. What does that mean for me? It means everything, because there are only 3 ways out of a trap this big. 2 of them are impossible. And the third one is a crime that is being committed against you right now, and you probably don't even know it's happening. Subscribe right now. We are going to expose the soft default. Here is the terrifying reality that no one in Washington wants to admit. There is no conventional way out of this trap. When a nation owes $38 trillion, there are only 3 mathematical ways to reduce the burden. And here is the problem. 2 of them are politically impossible. Door number 1 is austerity. This is the Dave Ramsey approach. You live on rice and beans. For the government, this means massive tax hikes and brutal spending cuts. To balance the budget today and start paying down the debt, the US government would have to either double income taxes or abolish the entire US military. Let's be honest. Neither of those things is going to happen. Any politician who proposes cutting Social Security checks by 30% isn't just committing career suicide. They are sparking a revolution. Any president who proposes a 70% tax rate gets voted out in a landslide. The American economy is addicted to government spending. Pulling the plug would trigger a Great Depression instantly. So austerity is off the table. Door number 2 is a hard default. This is where the government simply walks up to the podium and says, "Sorry, we are not paying." The money is gone. This is what Argentina, Russia, or Greece has done in the past. But for the United States, this is the nuclear option. Why? Because the US dollar is the global reserve currency. The entire financial system, every bank, every pension fund, every trade contract, is built on the foundation that US Treasury bonds are risk-free. If the US defaults, the global banking system collapses overnight. Trade stops, supply chains freeze, your credit card stops working at the gas station. It would be a financial apocalypse that makes 2008 look like a picnic. So, explicit default is also off the table. That leaves only one option. Door number 3. This is the option that every empire in history, from Rome to Weimar Germany to post-war Britain, has eventually chosen. It is the path of least resistance. It is the soft default. You don't refuse to pay the debt, you pay every single cent of it. But you pay it back in currency that is worth significantly less than when you borrowed it. You print the difference. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is the official, though unspoken, policy of the United States government. It is a process of financial repression designed to transfer wealth from savers to the state without you ever voting on it. They aren't going to break the system. They are going to dilute it. So, how do they pull off the soft default? The goal is simple. Keep the interest rate on the debt lower than the rate of inflation. This is a strategy called financial repression. Let's do the math. If the government owes $30 trillion and inflation is running at 5%, the real value of that debt shrinks by 5% every single year. In purchasing power terms, the government has just erased $1.5 trillion of debt in a single year without raising a single tax or cutting a single program. The bondholders get their money back, sure, but that money buys fewer groceries and fewer houses. It is a theft disguised as supply chain issues or transitory inflation. We are currently witnessing a historic shift in monetary policy called fiscal dominance. For 40 years, the Federal Reserve was the master. It raised interest rates to fight inflation, even if it hurt the economy, like Paul Volcker in 1980. Today, the Treasury is the master. The debt is so high that the Fed cannot raise interest rates high enough to truly kill inflation. Why? Because if interest rates went to 10%, which is what we would need to stop inflation today, the interest payments on the national debt would hit $3.8 trillion a year. That is more than the total tax revenue of the country. The US government would instantly collapse. So, the Fed is trapped. They are forced to tolerate higher inflation. They are forced to keep rates lower than they should be. They are forced to become an enabler of the Treasury's spending addiction. The independence of the central bank is dying. We are moving into an era where the money printer is permanently fused to the government budget. This is the hidden crisis. It isn't a sudden crash. It is a slow boil. The $38 trillion number will keep going up. It will hit $40 trillion, then $50 trillion. But the value of the dollar will keep going down. The government is betting that it can inflate away the debt faster than the market can panic. It is a dangerous high wire act. If they print too slowly, the debt crushes them. If they print too fast, they trigger hyperinflation. They are trying to thread the needle, running inflation at 4% or 5% for a decade. This sounds manageable, but the compound effect is devastating. At 5% inflation, the value of your life savings is cut in half in 14 years. That is the plan, to wipe out half the value of the national debt and half the value of your savings by the mid-2030s. In the next section, we will break down the specific mechanisms they use to do this. You need to understand that this isn't accidental. It is an engineered wealth transfer using modern tools designed to ensure you do not notice the theft until it is too late. Tool number 1, the captive buyer. In a free market, if a borrower is $38 trillion in debt and spending recklessly, lenders would demand a higher interest rate to compensate for the risk. They would say, pay me 10% or no deal. But the US government cannot afford 10%. So it rigs the market by creating a captive audience. Through a complex web of post-2008 banking regulations, like Basel III and Dodd-Frank, the government forces banks, insurance companies, and pension funds to hold US Treasury bonds. They designate these bonds as high-quality liquid assets. Banks are legally required to hold them to stay in business. It doesn't matter if the bonds pay 0.1% or if they are losing real value every year. The banks must buy them. This creates artificial demand and suppresses interest rates. Your pension fund isn't buying government debt because it's a good investment. It is buying it because it is against the law not to. Tool number 2, the broken compass, CPI manipulation. If you want to pay people less, but you promise to pay them based on inflation, like Social Security, the easiest solution is to redefine inflation. Since the 1980s, the methodology for calculating the Consumer Price Index, CPI, has been quietly rewritten to suppress the official number. They introduced tricks like substitution bias. The logic is, if the price of steak goes up, you won't buy steak, you will switch to hamburger. Therefore, your cost of living hasn't gone up as much as the steak price suggests. The CPI tracks the hamburger, effectively ignoring the fact that your standard of living has dropped. If we use the honest math from the 1980s today, inflation would consistently be double the official number. The government is gaslighting you about the cost of your own survival to save its budget. Tool number 3, the central bank put. When foreign nations stop buying US debt, which they are doing right now, the Federal Reserve steps in as the buyer of last resort. They print money to buy the bonds nobody else wants. Quantitative easing. This keeps the government's interest bill affordable, but it floods the economy with new dollars. This money hits Wall Street first, pumping up stocks and real estate, creating an everything bubble. It creates the illusion of wealth. Your house value looks higher, but it is a monetary mirage. You have more dollars, but those dollars buy less than they did 10 years ago. We have established that the government is erasing the debt by erasing the value of your money. But here's the brutal truth. This process does not hit everyone equally. In fact, it is the primary engine of the wealth gap that is tearing this country apart. To understand why, we have to revisit an 18th century French economist named Richard Cantillon. He observed a phenomenon that is now known as the Cantillon effect. He realized that where the new money enters the economy matters. When the Federal Reserve prints $1 trillion, they don't drop it from helicopters over Kansas. They don't mail a check to every citizen. They inject it into the financial sector. They buy bonds from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and BlackRock. These institutions get the new money first. They get it at near zero interest. They use this free cash to buy assets, stocks, real estate, and tech companies. By the time this new money trickles down to the average worker in the form of wages, prices have already risen. The rich get the money before inflation. The poor get the money after inflation. This is why, since 2008, we have seen a K-shaped economy. The asset-owning class, top 10%, has seen their wealth explode because the Fed is pumping up the value of their stocks and homes. The wage-earning class, bottom 90%, has seen their purchasing power collapse because their wages cannot keep up with the price of rent and groceries. The national debt is effectively being paid off by liquidating the American middle class. This dynamic is forcing a fundamental change in how we must live. For the last 40 years, the standard advice was work hard, save 10% of your income, put it in the bank, and buy government bonds. This was the 60-40 portfolio. It was designed for a world where money held its value. In a world of fiscal dominance, this advice is financial suicide. If you save in cash, you are guaranteed to lose to inflation. If you buy government bonds, you are guaranteed to lose purchasing power. We are entering an era of forced speculation. To simply preserve your wealth, you are forced to take risks. You have to buy stocks, real estate, or crypto just to outrun the devaluation of the currency. The government has turned the entire economy into a casino where you must gamble to survive, because the safe option, saving, is being deliberately destroyed. But the final tool in the government's arsenal has not been deployed yet. It is currently being built in the basement of the Federal Reserve. It is the central bank digital currency, CBDC. Right now, the government's ability to manipulate you is limited by physical cash. If the Fed sets interest rates to -5% to wipe out the debt faster, you would simply pull your cash out of the bank and hide it under your mattress to avoid the penalty. Physical cash is the ultimate check on government power. It allows you to exit the banking system. A CBDC removes that exit. If the dollar becomes purely digital, the Federal Reserve gains total control. They can implement negative interest rates instantly. They can deduct 1% from your balance every month to force you to spend. They can implement expiry dates on money, telling you that your stimulus check must be spent within 30 days or it vanishes. This is not science fiction. It is already being tested in China. The transition to a cashless society isn't about convenience. It is about control. It is about ensuring that there is no escape valve when the great wealth transfer accelerates. So, what is the verdict? The United States is defaulting. It is a slow, polite, and bureaucratic default. But it is a default nonetheless. The $38 trillion will never be paid back in real terms. The winners will be those who own scarce assets, real estate, gold, Bitcoin, profitable businesses, things that cannot be printed. The losers will be those who trust the currency and the institutions. The American dream of saving your way to prosperity is dead. We are now in the game of asset survival, but there is one final danger you need to know about. We have talked about how they use inflation to slowly seize your wealth. But history shows that when a government gets truly desperate, they stop being subtle. They stop asking. They simply take. In 1933, the United States government, the land of the free, did exactly that. They criminalized the ownership of the one asset that allowed citizens to protect themselves. Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, seizing the gold of every American citizen under threat of 10 years in prison. In the next video, we are going to tell the full, uncensored story of the Great Gold Seizure. We will uncover the secret prosecutions, the loopholes the wealthy used to escape, and the terrifying legal precedent that allows the president to seize your Bitcoin, gold, and 401k during a national emergency today. You need to know if your safe is actually safe. Smash that like button to keep the signal alive, and subscribe so you don't miss the history of the gold band. Comment Gold 1933 if you are ready. I'll see you in the vault.